A Russian kamikaze drone was shot down over Ukraine. Inside it, Ukrainian forces didn't just find explosives, they found something unexpected. What appeared to be a Starlink satellite terminal. Not a knockoff system, not a local radio link, but a satellite communication unit consistent with Starlink hardware, connected to the same network used by civilians, soldiers, and emergency services across the world. And that discovery quietly changed how this war has to be understood. Because this wasn't supposed to happen. When Ukrainian air defense units brought the drone down, it initially looked routine. Another long-range strike drone intercepted before reaching its target. These scenes have become grimly familiar after years of war. But when technicians began inspecting the wreckage, something didn't fit. The drone wasn't relying on traditional line-of-sight control. It wasn't dependent on nearby relay vehicles. It wasn't limited by terrain, distance, or ground-based jammers in the way Russian drones usually are. Bolted directly onto the drone's body was a satellite communication terminal, later examined and reported by Ukrainian defense analysts and verified open-source intelligence observers. That detail matters more than it sounds, because it suggests this drone wasn't just flying toward a target, it was staying connected far beyond the battlefield. There's no evidence that SpaceX or Elon Musk supplied this system to Russian forces. Starlink terminals are commercially available and have previously appeared in conflict zones through capture, resale, or secondary transfer. This wasn't a rumor pulled from social media. It wasn't a blurry photo without context. The discovery was documented after the drone was recovered, examined, and publicly reported by Ukrainian defense-focused outlets and OSINT analysts. The model, a Russian BM-35 kamikaze drone, had been modified to carry satellite communications hardware. For the first time, there was physical evidence that Russian forces were experimenting with or already deploying satellite-linked strike drones using commercial technology. And once you understand what that changes, the implications start to stack fast. Most drones in this war depend on fragile communication chains. They rely on ground stations. They rely on nearby vehicles. They rely on radio links that can be jammed, intercepted, or cut entirely. That vulnerability is why electronic warfare has been so effective in Ukraine. Jammers don't need to destroy drones, they just need to sever the link. A satellite connection changes that equation. A drone linked through orbit isn't bound by local terrain. It isn't dependent on nearby transmitters. It doesn't lose control just because it flies beyond the horizon. Instead, it stays connected through space. That doesn't make it unstoppable, but it makes it different. And difference is dangerous in a war where defenses are built around expectations. And this is where things get uncomfortable, because Starlink wasn't built for this. It's a commercial satellite internet system operated by SpaceX, widely used for civilian connectivity, disaster response, and with permission military communications. Again, there is no verified evidence that SpaceX or Elon Musk authorized or supplied this system for Russian military use, but that's almost beside the point. The real issue isn't who intended what. It's what happens when commercial technology becomes reusable battlefield infrastructure. Because once a system exists in large numbers, someone will find a way to repurpose it. Starlink terminals are commercially available in many regions. They can change hands through resale, intermediaries, black markets, or battlefield capture. None of that requires official approval, coordination, or intent from the manufacturer. And in modern wars, hardware moves faster than policy. What matters isn't the route this terminal took. What matters is that it ended up on a Russian strike drone and functioned well enough to be tested. That single fact forces planners to reassess assumptions. Because this wasn't an isolated experiment, independent analysts and open-source intelligence groups have already been tracking signs that Russian forces are attempting to extend drone range and resilience. Some reports suggest satellite communication hardware may have appeared on other Russian drone types as well. The BM-35 may simply be the first confirmed case where the evidence survived long enough to be photographed and examined, which raises a far bigger question. If this worked once, even imperfectly, why wouldn't it be tried again? For most of the war, drone battles have followed a pattern: launch, detect, jam, crash, or retreat. Satellite-linked control disrupts that rhythm. It doesn't make drones invisible. It doesn't make them immune to air defense. But it reduces the effectiveness of one of Ukraine's most reliable tools: localized electronic warfare. That forces adaptation, and wars are won by the side that adapts faster, not the side that invents first. This story isn't about blaming a company. It isn't about sensational accusations, and it isn't about one downed drone. It's about what happens when civilian technology quietly crosses into combat and no one fully controls what comes next. For most of the war, drones have died quietly. Not in explosions, not under gunfire, but in silence. A signal drops, the video feed freezes, the operator loses control. Electronic warfare doesn't need to win the sky. It just needs to make it unreliable. That's how Ukrainian defenses have been able to blunt waves of Russian drones without intercepting every single one. The Starlink-equipped drone disrupted that logic, because this time the connection didn't run through the battlefield. It ran above it. That difference sounds technical, but its effect is deeply practical. Traditional drone control depends on proximity. The operator needs to be within range. Relay stations need to stay intact. Terrain matters. Cities matter. Even weather can matter. A satellite-linked drone doesn't care about most of that. It can fly farther, it can loiter longer, it can adjust mid-flight without relying on fragile ground infrastructure. And most importantly, it doesn't fail at the moment electronic warfare units expect it to. That creates uncertainty, and uncertainty is dangerous in a system built on prediction. What Ukrainian planners immediately understood wasn't that this drone was unstoppable. It wasn't. It was shot down. What worried them was what stopped working the way it used to. Jamming that would normally force a drone to lose orientation didn't have the same effect. The control link wasn't routed through the airspace. Ukraine was saturating with interference. It was routed through space. That doesn't mean electronic warfare becomes useless. It means it becomes incomplete. Wars don't change because one side invents a perfect weapon. They change because counters stop being universal. For years, the assumption was simple: break the link and the drone becomes irrelevant. Satellite control fractures that assumption. Now, defenders have to think in layers. If you can't reliably sever control, you have to focus more heavily on detection, tracking, and kinetic interception. That costs more. It requires more assets, and it compresses reaction time. Every added second a drone stays controllable increases the chance it reaches a defended area. There's another consequence that matters just as much. Control isn't only about steering, it's about information. A connected drone can transmit live data longer. It can confirm damage. It can adjust aim based on changes on the ground. It can abort, reroute, or retask in ways pre-programmed drones can't. That turns a single drone into something closer to a sensor node with explosives attached. Not intelligent on its own, but responsive. And responsiveness is what electronic warfare was supposed to remove. This is where the discovery stops being about one drone and starts being about systems. If Russia can scale this approach, even imperfectly, it complicates Ukrainian air defense planning. Not because it guarantees success, but because it forces diversification of counters. More radar coverage, more interceptor drones, more point defense weapons, all of that stretches resources that are already finite. There's also a strategic irony here. Ukraine relies heavily on satellite connectivity for its own operations. It has built doctrine around resilience, decentralization, and constant communication. Seeing that same connective tissue appear on an enemy weapon isn't just tactically concerning. It's psychologically disruptive. It blurs the distinction between our advantage and neutral infrastructure. And once that line blurs, every future innovation carries an added question: who else can use this? The downed drone didn't prove Russia had solved the problem of Ukrainian air defenses, but it did prove something else. The race isn't just about better weapons anymore. It's about who can adapt civilian technology faster and who can defend against it once it escapes its original purpose. And that race rarely stays contained. When Ukrainian analysts examined the wreckage, the concern wasn't centered on damage. The drone had failed, the target had survived, the immediate threat was over. But wars aren't shaped by what explodes. They're shaped by what almost works. And this almost worked in a way that forced uncomfortable questions. For most of the conflict, Ukraine's air defense strategy has relied on a predictable trade-off. Russia could launch large numbers of drones, but control would degrade the deeper they flew. Signal interference, terrain masking, and layered jamming would slowly strip precision away. By the time many drones reached defended areas, they were already blind, drifting, or operating on crude inertial guidance. That's survivable. What the Starlink-equipped drone represented was a partial escape from that trade-off. Not immunity, but margin, and margin matters. The real shock wasn't that Russia experimented with satellite connectivity. It was that it did so outside the assumptions Ukrainian planners were optimizing against. Electronic warfare units are positioned, calibrated, and tasked based on expected signal paths. They focus on corridors where drones lose control, where operators panic, where feeds drop. A satellite-linked drone doesn't follow those paths. Its weakest point isn't local interference, it's terminal interception. That forces a shift in defensive emphasis, and shifts always create exposure. This is where the problem compounds. Ukraine doesn't have infinite interceptors, it doesn't have infinite radar coverage, and it doesn't have infinite reaction time. Electronic warfare is efficient because it scales. One system can affect dozens of drones at once. Kinetic interception doesn't scale the same way. Every drone becomes an individual problem that must be seen, tracked, and stopped physically. Even a small number of satellite-linked drones can therefore distort defense planning out of proportion to their quantity. There's also a timing issue most people miss. Satellite connectivity doesn't just extend range, it stabilizes the final moments of an attack. That's the phase where Ukrainian defenses have been most effective. When drones wobble, when targeting degrades, when last-second evasive maneuvers fail. A stable link at the end of the flight compresses reaction windows. It reduces defender confidence that jamming will solve it in time. That doesn't guarantee impact, but it removes a layer of comfort. And comfort is dangerous in war because defenses don't just rely on equipment, they rely on expectation. Crews know what usually happens when they activate certain systems. They know when a drone is likely to lose control. They know when patience works. This drone violated those expectations, not dramatically, not decisively, but clearly enough to matter. There's another layer here that makes this discovery more unsettling than it looks. Control links don't just enable guidance, they enable learning. A drone that stays connected longer can transmit more data about what it sees, what it survives, and what nearly stops it. That data feeds back into future designs, tactics, and routes. Even a failed mission can become a successful experiment, and experiments compound faster than victories. This is why Ukrainian officials treated the find seriously without overreacting publicly. They understand the danger of panic narratives. They also understand the danger of ignoring weak signals. This wasn't a breakthrough, but it was a direction, and directions matter far more than one-off results. At this point, it's important to slow the story down, because the danger here isn't that Russia suddenly gained a decisive new weapon, and it's not that Starlink specifically has changed sides. The real issue is what kind of war this discovery points toward next. The Ukrainian military isn't shocked by innovation anymore. This war has been an innovation engine since the first month. What does raise alarms is when innovation starts moving up the stack, away from improvisation and towards systems thinking. This drone wasn't clever because it used a satellite terminal. It was clever because it tested whether Russia could step outside the local electronic battlefield entirely. That's a different level of adaptation. For most of the war, the drone fight has been geographically constrained. Control stations are local, jammers are local. Operators and defenders are locked into the same electromagnetic bubble. That bubble is where Ukraine has excelled. A satellite-linked drone stretches that bubble, not infinitely, but enough to complicate assumptions. It introduces the idea that control, observation, and decision-making don't need to sit anywhere near the front line. That matters even if the system is inefficient, bulky, or rare, because once the concept exists, refinement follows. This is where Ukrainian planners start thinking beyond the wreckage. They don't ask, did this work? They ask, what would this look like if it worked better? Smaller terminals, more power-efficient links, better integration with autonomous guidance. None of that requires a miracle. It requires iteration. And iteration is exactly what this war has accelerated on both sides. There's also a strategic discomfort here that has nothing to do with drones. Satellite connectivity blurs lines. It blurs the line between civilian and military infrastructure. It blurs the line between state systems and commercial technology. And it blurs responsibility in ways that make escalation harder to manage. That doesn't mean those lines disappear, but it does mean every incident carries more political weight than the hardware alone would suggest. Ukraine understands this sensitivity better than most. That's why official responses stayed measured. No sensational claims, no public accusations beyond what could be verified. The focus stayed on facts, not narratives. Because once you escalate rhetorically, you lose control of where the story goes. And control, more than firepower, is what Ukraine has fought to preserve throughout this war. Here's the part most people will miss if they only focus on the headline. It's about what happens when a war forces both sides to test the edges of the system they're trapped inside. Ukraine didn't panic. It paid attention because the assumptions underneath its defenses were being tested. That's the uncomfortable truth at the center of this story. The technology looked dramatic. The implications sounded alarming. But the outcome was ordinary, and that's exactly why it matters. Wars don't turn on clever ideas. They turn on which ideas survive contact with reality. This one didn't, at least not yet. So what actually happened here? A Russian drone was fitted with the satellite terminal. It was shot down. The attack failed, but the idea survived long enough to matter. Not because it worked, but because it showed where pressure is building. And that's the real takeaway. In this war, the most dangerous developments aren't always the ones that succeed. They're the ones that force everyone else to rethink what success even looks like. And once that happens, the battlefield quietly shifts, even when nothing explodes.